At the moment, many sanctuaries offer accommodation. This is a great way for them to earn a little bit of money to support the animals. And it's also a great way for vegans to support these kinds of places and to maybe see some rescued and sanctuary animals while they're on their travels.
Hey, friends and listeners of the Switch for Good podcast. Yep, that's you. I have some really exciting news. Dotsie and I have started a Switch for Good podcast Facebook group. We created it so we can build a community of fans that will help us improve the show and deliver on the topics that you want to learn more about. So we want to hear what your favorite content is, what you want more of, and what you want less of. And if you like the length of the show, Dotsie and I are always talking about the length of the show, right, Dotsie?
Yes.
We want to tailor our show around the needs and desires of our incredible listeners, almost 500,000 of you. And it's really simple to join. Just go to our Switch for Good Facebook page. That's Switch, the number 4, and then Good. And then click on groups. And there we are, the Switch for Good podcast chat. You can post directly in the group, share ideas, talk to other listeners, and connect with like-minded folks. So go, run, join our Facebook group and tell us what you want. From the sultry jungles of Vietnam to the golden dunes of Morocco to the enchanting cafe terraces of Paris, today's intrepid guest has seen it all. And after years of personal and professional experience, World Vegan Traveler co-founder Brighde Reed wants to share her vast knowledge with you. As a passionate vegan activist, chef, and travel enthusiast, Brighde and her partner Sebastian have created a travel company that takes vegans and anyone curious about veganism on these incredible tours in especially selected locations around the world, all while having access to delicious vegan food and luxury accommodations. Additionally, they've been featured in such illustrious outlets as the New York Times, Forbes Online, and Lonely Planet. So, sit back, relax, and take this amazing journey with us as our next guest enlightens us on the exhilaration, wonder, and occasional pitfalls of exploration. Thank you so much for being on the show, Brighde.
Thank you both very much. It's my honor to be here.
So share with us a little bit about what started your love of travel, because someone who starts a travel company must really love to explore new places.
Sure. Well, I guess I became very interested in travel after listening to my mum's travel stories. She was Australian, moved to the UK in the 60s, and she would recount tales of incredible trips in Eastern Europe and Russia as a female traveler with a girlfriend of hers. And this just sounded so incredibly exciting, combined with the fact that when I was 18, I moved from the UK to Australia. So I kind of developed this appreciation and excitement of traveling to other countries and living in other countries. So I guess that was sort of the start of it all. And I did a little bit of travel in my 20s. I lived in France and a couple of other places. And then I went back to Australia because I thought I had settled at that time. But a colleague of mine, she pointed out a job advertisement in the newspaper, as it was back then, to become a tour leader for a travel company at that time. This was 20 years ago. And I applied, was accepted. And I spent the next 5 years as a tour leader, going to some incredible locales, taking people with me. That was a very memorable 5 years. And then I met my partner, Sebastian. We weren't vegan at that time. We met each other as tour leaders in Morocco, and he was obviously he had a love of travel as well. And we have done lots of travel since that point, and we decided to do this on a more professional basis with our own company a few years ago.
Oh, it's so exciting. I love that you got your travel bug from mom. And, the travel that my husband and I have done, since the cycling careers where we've really gotten to, just just kind of lean into the flavor of wherever we are. We've been to a few different places in Europe and some in South America. We went to Nicaragua a couple of years ago, and it can be really tough traveling, especially to third world countries, as a vegan who is very much in it for the lives of and love of animals. And I noticed when we got to Nicaragua and we were driving to the resort, it was just probably one of the most painful experiences I had. And I know Alexandra had one not too long ago in a faraway island as well. And we discussed this, seeing such in your face, visceral animal cruelty. And I'm not saying, oh, this only happens in third world countries. Hell no, it happens here every day. We just put it behind walls, right? Here in the States and in some of the first world countries, because we don't want people to actually see what's going on. But so much more out in the open. And as we drove down the windy road towards the resort, in every single yard, there were animals tied up so tightly to this tree stump that they couldn't move. And there wasn't any food or water that you could see. And it was horses and it was pigs and it was dogs. And so I'm curious with this vegan travel experience, how do you navigate that? Because we can't be the only ones that have these experiences. And we ended up not leaving the resort really during that trip. And I didn't see much of Nicaragua because it was just so painful to leave, right? The walls are down in more so in the third world countries than the first world countries.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I have a number of tips for travelers that are traveling by themselves independently, and I'm maybe we can get into that a little bit later on.
Yeah.
But yes, you are right. Definitely in other countries, the oppression of animals, the cruelty towards animals, it can be a lot more visual, and that is very confronting. So on our trips, we do a number of things to mitigate that. Of course, we cannot necessarily do this entirely 100%. Even with the best of intentions, there could be a possible slip up. So to give you some examples of what we would do is we would make sure that the bedding is completely animal free. We would ask for certain things to be taken down in the hotel. For example, we have this lovely hotel in Alsace, which is a French country area, and they happen to have a deer head on the wall most of the time, but when we're there, they take it off. So there's all of these kinds of things. We also try whenever possible to have either a special corner of the restaurant, or ideally a private room, a private space, so that we're not smelling people's bacon, for example. And of course, we make sure that we are very aware of where we're going to be going, what we're going to be doing, so that we can avoid all of those things as we possibly can. So, for example, if we have a market tour, then we'll avoid the meat and the fish section, for example. And
right.
We would never include activities that would be against a vegan lifestyle. So, for example, we wouldn't go and visit a leather tannery in a Morocco trip, for example. If it was a cooking class, then obviously it would be vegan, but we would also prep the instructors to not mention that this is great with fish, for example, whatever. And we also prep our local guides that we work with to just to not avoid the topic entirely, but to just not say, oh my goodness, this area is known for its incredible delicious beef dish, for example. We try to have that conversation ahead of time, because we want this to be a very, very safe space for our travelers, where they get a little bit of a holiday from being a vegan in a non-vegan world. So that's what we're always trying to do. So that's how we do it on our trips. But of course, and throughout my years working and being a traveler, we have certainly developed some tips as well for people.
I'm of two minds. And, if one of your goals is to make a space where a vegan can feel more comfortable, then I certainly understand that. But there's something to be said for seeing another culture that is very different from ours. There's something that's enriching about that. So if we take away everything that bothers us, then it becomes very sanitized.
You're absolutely right. And something that we always try to do on every single trip is we invite somebody who is doing really interesting and exciting work in the animal protection area, and they would come to lunch or dinner, and we can have like a really nice conversation over dinner about, what are the issues in that particular country? What is the work being done? For example, we're heading to Rwanda next week, in 3 weeks, and I was just organizing invitations to people who are doing really interesting things in animal protection in Rwanda. So one is the founder of the Rwanda Humane Society. He's fantastic. And another person who's doing some really interesting things with pet food, and also a dog protection agency, WAG Kigali, that we've worked with. We've had over for lunch before, because there is very interesting things in Rwanda, especially in relation to Rwanda's relationship with dogs, which really goes back to the genocide. So this is really interesting. And
tell us more about that. Tell us more about the genocide.
It's a little bit confronting. I hope that's okay. But basically, during the genocide, for those people that don't know, maybe younger listeners, in 1994, there was an incredible genocide of one of the groups of people in Rwanda. And in a 90-day period of time, hundreds of thousands of people were massacred in the most horrific ways. This, of course, resulted in an incredible trauma for the whole country. And one of the things, this is really kind of painful to say, but one of the things that that happened during that time is that you can imagine what dogs did when there were lots of bodies in the street. So this, you can imagine that relationships with dogs is a little bit complex. And as a result, WAG Kigali is doing amazing work in trying to change this relationship towards dogs, and also trying to get dogs adopted. I mean, generally speaking, in Rwanda, there's not a big, huge stray dog problem in comparison to other places, like Thailand, for example. But that doesn't mean that the stray dogs that are there, or dogs that maybe there are dogs that are not being spayed and neutered. Maybe people who do have dogs need support to have their dogs spayed or neutered, those kinds of things. So there are people doing this kind of work. It's really interesting, and we really want to introduce what's going on in animal protection to our travelers, because they're really interested in it.
That's so amazing. Rwanda is an amazing country. I have not been there, but I know how progressive they are. They stopped plastic bags, single-use plastic bags, years before anybody else did. And I also remember a story that was very moving to me after this awful genocide between the Hutus and the Tutsis in Rwanda. They had these people, it was so traumatic that they had people in yellow shirts standing at street corners who would hug you if you broke down for some reason. They just were huggers. And that was their job, because there was so much pain in the country after this terrible thing happening in the 90s. And I thought that was just so loving. I don't know if the United States would be so open to something out of the box like that. But anyway, it sounds like a wonderful trip to Rwanda.
Yeah. Rwanda is a very, very humbling destination. How they've come through this trauma is really quite remarkable. And there's a lot of things that we all could probably learn from that.
Yeah. Alexandra, we can stand on the street corner and hug people.
Actually, I do have a friend, my friend Conrad, and his wife sometimes stand in the mall in Santa Monica and give free hugs, actually. Well, this is pre-COVID. I don't know how people would feel about it now, but
we're coming back. Did they wear a sign?
They wore
so
yellow
people
shirts,
know?
Yellow shirts. And it was more that it was more that when they saw somebody in pain, they would
Right.
go over and hug them, is my understanding. Is that right, Brighde?
I have never actually heard that story, despite knowing a little bit about
Me
the
neither. I didn't
Rwandan
know.
genocide. But it would not surprise me, knowing how incredible all of the work that they have done. They instigated restorative justice there as well, because it would have taken hundreds and hundreds of years to get all of the perpetrators through the court system. So yeah, they've done really amazing stuff, and there's some great laws in place to, prevent anything like that ever happening again.
Restorative justice is what South Africa did too, right? So it's where it's not about punishment. It's about just telling the story of your pain and the injustice that happened to you, but not seeking punishment against the perpetrators.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing. So forward thinking. Tell us about your favorite countries to travel to. You've been to so many places. What is your favorite destination personally, and maybe to take groups too, as a vegan or as just Brighde?
Sure. Okay. Well, I'm not fussy. I'll go anywhere. I like going anywhere, and I don't usually let the fact that maybe the country isn't very vegan friendly deter me at all. And that sort of goes into my first tip. It's, really your experience will be determined by your mindset about a place and about an area. So for that reason, countryside France is a very interesting place to me. I have a big connection with France. I tour led there. I lived there for a year after university, and I speak French, and we have run some trips to France as well. And I think it's a really great place to go to on a vegan trip, actually, because of course we've made all of the French specialties vegan. So France is wonderful. I have a particularly preference for Thailand as well. I've spent 10 years living in Thailand, and it's extremely vegan friendly. And of course, Thai cuisine is incredible, but I have a very soft spot there. I love places in Africa because very often we are able to see incredible animals and have amazing opportunities to see wildlife in their natural settings, where they're not being bothered, or hardly at all, by our presence. So these places I love. I'm not fussy at all when it comes to destinations. And in terms of our trips, I will say that our Italy trips are getting quite a bit of buzz. They seem to be very popular. We have an incredible trip in Tuscany, and also northern Italy, starting in Milan and finishing in Venice, going through the mountains of the Dolomites and the Italian lakes and all of these things. We stay in some amazing vegan hotels in the Sud Tirol, which is like the German-speaking part of Italy. Italy, of course, is an incredibly popular destination anyway, so that could go part way to explain why people like coming to Italy with us. But also Italy naturally is, Tuscan, central and southern Italy. Italian food is very, very vegan friendly. In the north requires a little bit more work because it's more influenced by Germany and Austria and these kinds of things. It's more sort of mountain food. But yeah, these places are really popular. And of course, Italy, it's amazing.
Absolutely. You pretty much had me with your first sentence, though, the countryside of France. And then you said, because they do such beautiful vegan cuisine. And of course, all I'm thinking is cheese, butter, croissant. So tell us about what they're making and how creative they must be to be able to turn all that delicious food that we used to eat that we don't anymore into a vegan spread.
Sure thing. Well, I can tell you about the France trips that we've run before, and that is specifically Paris to Alsace, that little area that borders Germany. It's a very interesting cultural area because this part of France has flip-flopped between being owned by Germany and being owned by France. So there's a lot of sort of Germanic influences there. So whenever we are running our trips, we try to make if the cuisine of the destination is particularly notable, for example, France and Italy and Thailand and Vietnam, then of course we will want to make vegan versions of those dishes. Sometimes we might go to a country where the cuisine isn't particularly notable, in which case we might have, a Mexican night or a pizza night or something like that. But getting back to France, which does have a very notable cuisine and it's not very vegan friendly. So we'll usually try to find a balance between like French dishes and perhaps Alsatian dishes. So off the top of my head, that in Alsace, some regional dishes that we would have are things like Fleischknacker, which is probably something you've never heard of. It's these kind of like bits of stuffed pasta that would normally have meat in, but it actually has like a vegan meat, of course, and it's sort of cooked in like a clear broth. So that's one example. Tarte flambée is another example that we veganize. So, for example, that's like a flatbread with cheese and lardons, vegan lardons, like bacon bits on there. I will say that this particular trip, we often use a lot of vegan meats to substitute the non-vegan meats. So, for example, choucroute, which is like hot sauerkraut with sausages, and potatoes, that would be another dish that we would have. But we would also have some French classics as well. Oh, Black Forest gâteau would be another Alsatian specialty. But we would also have like things like French onion soup and steak tartare. We'd have lots of French patisserie croissants and almond croissants, all of those kinds of things. So really all of those French classics or regional classics, but made vegan.
Yeah. So do you find chefs or do you find restaurants that have the chefs that are willing to cater just to you all, or both? I can't imagine some of those initial early conversations you had when you started your company. Like, we're coming.
Fantastic. Yeah, great question. So often we can visit vegan restaurants in a particular place, particularly in cities, if there happens to be one there that's good and will serve French food and it's nice, that's pretty easy. But sadly, and this is something maybe we can talk about later, there's not a lot of vegan hotels around. So when you're staying in a place, then you're staying in a hotel that's probably not vegan. So when we approach them, my partner Seb is this person. He looks at hotels and he has an idea of this. For example, he looks at which ones look like they would fit our group, fit our brand, fit our travelers, fit our style of travel. And then he'll reach out to them and he'll say to them, look, we're really interested in your hotel. We're a vegan group. And are you interested in that? This is what we would expect. Are you up for this? And their response will usually speak volumes. And we say things like, it's going to be a bit of work. We're going to have to really work together to come up with great menus. It's going to require a bit of work. For example, in that hotel in the countryside of Alsace, for example, they had just renovated and they really wanted a group to take over the hotel for the whole week. I will say that when you have a big group, you have a lot more there's more incentive for the hotels and the restaurants to make an effort than if it was just a couple of people staying there, which is why sometimes it's nice to travel with a vegan group, for example. And we spoke with them. We had lots of meetings ahead of time. They said, yes, this sounds great. And it just so happened that they had a vegan supermarket just 20 minutes down the road. And they went there one day and they chatted with the owner of this place for like all day to get ideas of the great products that they could use and that kind of thing. So it's a really collaborative process. It involves me, giving recipe suggestions and, letting them have some creativity as well and giving feedback on that, suggesting places where they might buy products. It's a bit epic. For example, just this morning, I had like a 1-hour conversation with our partner in South Africa for our South Africa trip that's coming up. And the menus just look incredible. I'm just so excited about it.
Well, that's good. I would imagine a lot of chefs would be excited about this challenge. But you do have more pull as a group. And you mentioned that you were going to share tips on how a vegan traveling alone or just with a partner could navigate this. Can you give some suggestions on how to craft a vegan trip as a solo traveler?
Absolutely, absolutely, I can. Well, I've already sort of touched on the first one, which is really adjusting your mindset. Like if you look through an lens of lack, this is a quote from my friend Colleen Patrick Goodrow. If you look through a lens of lack, then that is often what you will see. If you look through a lens of abundance, then that is often what you will see and what you will experience. So those kinds of attitude shifts can be very, very helpful. It's also very easy for us to blame negative culinary experiences that we have on the fact that we are vegan. But the fact is, when we travel, whether we're vegan or not, we can often have negative culinary experiences. So, we should really keep this in mind. And when we travel, unless we're like a really big foodie or we decide to make that the focus of our trip, we don't just go to a country to enjoy the food. We go there to enjoy the culture, the people, the new experience, the history, all of those things. So maybe it's interesting to sort of pivot our attention to focus on that rather than perhaps less than stellar food options that there might be or that you might experience once or twice. So that's my first tip. My second tip is to use apps or sites to help you. Now, if you have been vegan for 5 minutes, you will know about Happy Cow. Everyone knows about that. It's very, very comprehensive, but there are a few features in Happy Cow that people might not know about. For example, if you have the app, you can create trips and you can, look through ahead of time at the places that you want to check out, and you can heart them and shortlist them, whatever it is. So that's really great. But that's not the only one. There are two more that I'd love to refer to. One is country-specific apps or websites. For example, going back to my France alternative, going back to France, there is an incredible website called Veggie Resto. And Veggie Resto is a French version of Happy Cow. Now, as you can imagine, Happy Cow is predominantly used by English speakers, but there's so many other languages out there, and Veggie Resto happens to be the one that a lot of French people use. So finding out what the alternative site is in the country where you're going to and checking that out. These days, the user experience is very good. You don't necessarily have to speak French to get a good idea about it. So that's another one to research and find out.
Is Veggie Resto just for French vegan options, or is it international?
Yes, that's a French specific site.
Okay. And Happy Cow is international. I've used it when I was working in Bulgaria and found some vegan restaurants and markets. Yeah.
I was remembering a site, Veggie Hotels, that I
we're going to talk about that next.
Okay. Yeah. They have places all over the world. I mean, Tuscany and Costa Rica and Bali, and we're thinking about going to one of them. But anyway, great. I'm glad you're going to bring them in.
Great. Okay. My third website that you might like to check out as well. It's known by some and they really love it, but not many people know about it yet. It's a Singaporean site called A Billion, which is worldwide. And we
advertised for them for 6 months, 3 months, something like that.
Oh,
yeah.
Wonderful,
we had Vikas on the podcast, actually. Yeah.
Great. Okay. So you probably know about it. All of your listeners probably know about it, but it's a little bit more than Happy Cow in terms of, you can rate and review certain dishes. It talks about products in a country as well. And every time you do a review, $1 gets donated to an animal protection charity. So that's another one to check out. My other sites that I'd love to share with you are vegiehotels. So this one is really kind of cool because it has all of the vegan hotels around the world, or all of the vegan friendly, very, very vegan friendly hotels around the world as well. And, it would be wonderful if every single town or village or city had one vegan hotel. That would be great. But the reality is we don't have that yet. But what I really love about this website is, depending on what you find on this this site, you might decide to base your stay in this place, in which case it might take you a little bit more off the beaten track than you might expect. Like there are some incredible little vegan bed and breakfast with dinner in rural areas of France or Italy and places that you might not normally go to. So this can be a really great way at getting you off the beaten track as well. And very often in the countryside, there's not many vegan options. And these places have some sort of half board thing going on where you have breakfast and dinner at the hotel. So, you're pretty much sorted for all of your food. Another really great one is Veg Visits. Are you aware of this one?
No.
Okay. It's very much like a vegan version of Airbnb. And it's kind of like how Airbnb was about 10 years ago, before, pretty much going to any Airbnb was like a 5-star hotel with loads of amenities and all of these kinds of things. So very often you're in a shared, you have a room in somebody's house. You'll see that person and they'll give you recommendations and that kind of thing. It's a really nice site and would be great for people who want to support vegans when they travel. So this is another really great one. There's another one which is really interesting that has just been released called the Vegan Stay. Have you heard of it?
No. This is all new stuff.
You are schooling us. I am like saving all of these, and I realize I can listen to this podcast later and save it. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is great.
The Vegan Stay is new to the scene. I actually interviewed Fike, the founder of this site, on my podcast just a few weeks ago. And it's kind of like a combination between like veg visits, but also stays in sanctuaries as well. Oh. So at the moment, many sanctuaries offer accommodation. This is a great way for them to earn a little bit of money to support the animals. And it's also a great way for vegans to support these kinds of places and to maybe see some rescued and sanctuary animals while they're on their travels. So it's still quite new. There's not a huge amount of listings there yet. So they have approved sanctuaries that are there, and you can book through them, book through Vegan Stay, and any booking fee that is paid during that. So normally sanctuaries who are listed on Airbnb, they will still need to pay a booking fee to Airbnb and book Airbnb fees. Whereas with the Vegan Stay, sanctuaries will get all of that money, which is great. And also the vegans accommodations or vegan bed and breakfasts who don't have some sort of sanctuary component, they can also be listed, and those booking fees will be distributed to the sanctuaries on the site as well. So it's kind of a cool new thing. I really invite people to check it out.
Can you spell it for us? Because I looked up Vegan Stay and it says it's not a site. So is it stay, like S-T-A-Y?
The Vegan Stay, S-T-A-Y.
Perfect. Thank you.
Just checking it right here.
Excellent. No, I want to make sure everybody gets these down.
The Vegan Stay.
These are fantastic tips. I'm super curious with all your travels, even before you were vegan, because I know you were vegetarian at a very young age, but not vegan. So from some of your early travels to now, what country or region in the world, or even a city, have you seen make the most positive steps forward for us, positive for us vegans, what we would consider positive steps forward towards just using less animals and kind of everything they do, especially when it comes to travel and people's experiences from around the world that come there? Where is it, and what changes have you seen over the years?
Paris, without a doubt.
Wow.
Probably because I've been traveling to Paris for a really long time. As I mentioned, I lived in the north of France, and I would often go down to Paris. I was vegetarian at that point. And I remember going to vegetarian restaurants, and they were very sort of health focused, very sort of I don't want to say basic, but very sort of healthy food. But certainly not the French classics, for example. And I went to Paris before the pandemic. I think it was 2019. Yes. And of course, there were quite a few restaurants at that point. However, we were just there a few months ago, and I looked on Happy Cow and filtered for vegan options. And I realized that the choice was going to be very, very difficult indeed in terms of what is available now. I will say that in Paris, there are not a lot of vegan options on non-vegan restaurants still, like we might expect in California or Vancouver, where I live, but it doesn't matter because there are so many vegan restaurants. I really invite people to go onto Happy Cow, go to Paris, filter for vegan restaurants, and they will probably be very surprised.
Wow. What about traveling on a budget for a vegan? Do you have any tips for that?
Yeah, great question. I do. We have, let me just.
Is it less expensive to, I mean, I imagine it's less expensive to travel without having all the planning that a travel tour group like yours does. But in the end, is there a big difference, or do you get discounts because you're a group and that makes up for some of the extra that you might charge?
Okay, so definitely we spend a huge amount of time planning for our trips, which explains part of the reason why people might look at our trips and think that they are expensive. But we also get like group rates and these kinds of things, and we're able to buy wine by the bottle, for example, all of this kind of stuff that can, offset the price a little bit. But certainly there are plenty of more budget vegan travel. For example, if you are traveling independently, if you are more backpackering, hostels are still a thing. Rooms in Airbnbs are still a thing. Self-catering is very doable. Very often in France, for example, there are huge amounts of vegan products just in the regular grocery store. I'm always quite surprised when I go to even a little store in a village. They'll definitely have at least soy milk and maybe a couple of yogurts and maybe a couple of vegan burger kinds of things. So definitely there's ways to make it a lot cheaper. And of course, buying food at the supermarket or at the market is always much, much cheaper than getting the same thing in a hotel or restaurant that's where someone has had to process it, produce it, prepare it, and pay someone salaries. So my third tip is to consider packing some supplies or some tools to help you. So things that I always like to travel with is a little bit of Tupperware. This is really great if you want to take home leftovers from a restaurant, or you don't want your grapes that you've purchased to end up in a big splodgy mess at the bottom of your backpack. This is a really helpful thing to do. A sharp knife is really fantastic. Just going back to those Tupperwares, I often like to get the collapsible silicone ones, which save a little bit of space. So a sharp knife is also a really good idea cutting up food, preparing sandwiches on the road. We often will buy deli meats and vegan cheeses and mustard and a little bit of mayonnaise to make sandwiches on the road that we can have anywhere. A tea towel is a really great thing. It can be a makeshift tablecloth or wipe things up, and that's quite good. You can just throw it in the laundromat when you're doing your washing while you're traveling. And my top tip for this one is like maybe a collapsible cool bag with, those little blue bricks that you can freeze. So I always like to travel with these. I can put my vegan meats in there. I'll often ask the hotel, if I'm staying in a hotel, to freeze it overnight. I also like to use it so that I can bring home maybe some treats, gifts for friends, or just maybe some great French vegan cheeses so that I can then relive my French vegan experiences back home. So these are really, really lovely things that I like to carry. I also like to carry a Tetra pack of shelf-stable milk and maybe some cutlery, a spoon and a knife and a fork. Also some healthy snacks as well, so that you can, if you can't find something straight away, then you're not going to get hangry about it. And some people, even when they're traveling, maybe not traveling internationally, but if they're traveling domestically, they might like to carry a small appliance with them. For example, if they're doing a road trip, they might like to take an Instant Pot with them or a blender so that they can make sure that they have a healthy smoothie at breakfast. Sometimes we don't necessarily always eat super healthy when we travel. So starting the day with something wholesome and plant-based and chopped with whole foods is a great way to start the day, and maybe makes up a little bit for nutritional deficiencies that we might have throughout the day. Okay. Should I keep going with tip 4? I feel like I'm doing a lot of talking.
Yes, no, well, you're our guest.
You are.
Okay.
And I might say that list that you just gave thus far, this last list is very sustainable, right, Alexandra, right? With the metal cup and the tea towel and the food containers and the extra utensils. I mean, vegan or not, that is the way to go to not be wasteful as you're traveling. So just bravo.
Yeah, and you have a blog on your website which has suggestions on how to travel more sustainably, and so folks can go there, or you can add. Yeah. I'm sure it'll come up again as we talk. There's a lot of intersectionality here.
Fantastic. Yes, there's lots of stuff on our website. My 4th tip, and I touched on this in the 3rd tip as well, is to consume nutrient-rich foods a few times a day. And there's a few ways that you can do that. I talked about having a smoothie, or maybe loading up on fruit and veggies for breakfast if you're in like a hotel buffet kind of situation where, you know, the choices could be a little bit limited if you're vegan. So maybe really go for the salads and the fruits and really try to get as much nutrition as you possibly can. Mm-hmm. Another tip could be carrying some sort of greens powder. For example, when I was traveling in Nepal, I was trekking in Nepal several years ago as a vegan, and most of the food that they serve up in the mountains when you're trekking, especially when you're up high, is just vegan by default. But I will say, for a number of reasons, it's not very vegetable heavy. So this causes a huge problem for Nepalese people that are there. And, you know, they're often quite malnourished up in the mountains, which is very, very sad. And this is not something we have to deal with if we're just there for a few days, but you might like to decide to pack some sort of greens powder, so at least you have these nutrition, your micronutrients covered for that day. And in a similar kind of vein, something we also did in Nepal as well is to have like freeze-dried or vegetable snacks or kale chips or fruit leather as well. These are some other ways that you can up your nutrition. And I really invite people as well to dig into the produce of the local area. For example, I'm not particularly inspired by apples personally. And as a result, you know, if I'm carrying a few of those in my backpack as a snack, I'm probably not going to want to eat those, if I'm being truly honest with myself. However, Italian cherry tomatoes from the south of Italy, pop them in my mouth like popcorn. It's just not a difficult thing. So stocking up on those can be really great. Another example would be in Thailand. There's street vendors that sell the most delicious and sweet pineapple that you could possibly imagine. Stock up on that and eat that whenever you are hungry or whenever you need a snack, so that you're getting plenty of fiber, which is a nice thing to do while you're on holiday. And of course, you know, you probably should consider traveling with your vitamin supplement and B12. That's my 4th tip. My 5th tip is to write a bit of a wish list of places that you would like to see, of restaurants and experience that you would like to see ahead of time. So there are so many ways that we can get this ahead of time. We can Google vegan travel guide to Spain, a vegan travel guide to Barcelona. We can look on Happy Cow. These are great places, but also YouTube videos. There are some really great travel vegan YouTubers, like V-Rated Vegan Food is one by Eunice Reyes. She just basically goes around and does food tours of various cities. And these are really fantastic ways of identifying places that you're really excited and keen to check out. And then I really invite people to star these on their Google Maps, because when you star them, no matter where you're sort of navigating with Google Maps, you will still see those stars, so that you can know, oh my goodness, that place that we really wanted to go to that had this thing, it's just around the corner. Let's go there after our morning at Le Louvre in Paris, for example. So definitely writing a wish list is a good idea. Okay. Should I go on to my 6th tip, or do you want to say anything about that?
We want to hear all 9.
We are soaking it up. I really like that one, because sometimes you do just arrive in places and with all the excitement and wonder, and start walking around the city and you have no idea where you're going or what you're going to see, so I really like that. Think ahead quite a bit more than my husband and I do. Probably some other people do what you're saying already, but I really like that. Do some research.
Yeah. We do a lot of research. Some people don't like to do it, but if that's your thing, then you might like to consider these other ways to find information. And I'll talk about social media in a moment. My 6th tip is to let accommodations know ahead of time. Now, generally speaking, I don't bother doing this if I'm just staying at a hotel for one night and I'm going to be having dinner at a local restaurant. I might you just not even bother with breakfast if it happens to be included. I'll just take my vegan soy milk and just have it there and have it with cereal, something like that. However, if I'm going to be spending an extended period of time, like at a resort, where it's likely that I'm going to be spending most meals at that place, then I would definitely let them know ahead of time. So I would probably ask for the contact details of the food and beverage manager and explain what's going on. Just ask them to brief the chefs, and it would just be so wonderful if there could be some vegan options available, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And then, this might not be everyone's cup of tea. After all, they are on holiday, but I'll often, when I arrive, I'll want to say hi to the food and beverage manager and just check in. Oh, hi, I'm so excited to see what you've got on offer. We're really pleased to come here, all of these things. And definitely, give feedback, positive and constructive, as you're going along. And I really invite people to not, if they haven't done a good job or they've made mistakes, maybe don't, slam them on social media or reviews, because that is going to create a lot of ill feeling. I know this for a fact from, conversations that I've had with suppliers and providers in the past. Rather, if you feel so inclined at the end of your stay, give some feedback. You're on holiday, possibly you don't want to do that, but that's just something that you might like to do. So that's my 6th tip. My 7th tip, and this is something that people often don't think about or don't know how to, is to learn or have access to a little of the language. Now, you do not have to be a fluent French speaker to go and order vegan food in France, but there are some things that you can do. For example, most people will know about Google Translate. It's just an app on your phone, but it has some really cool features that many people don't know about. For example, you might like to, ahead of time, enter some phrases and then star them so that you can access them very quickly. You might also decide to download the language of the place that you're going to, so that you don't have to have an internet connection in order to be able to communicate. It also has this really cool feature where you can use the camera lens and put it over an ingredients list or a menu, and it will do a 50-60% okay job at translating it actually on the screen. It looks very Harry Potter-like. It's really kind of cool.
I've used that. It is crazy cool. Yeah.
It's really cool. And you can even speak into Google Translate and have it translate. You can have a conversation where you speak in English and the other person speaks in French, and you can have this kind of conversation. Play with it a little bit ahead of time, practice it, so that you know what its limitations are and you know how to use it. So this is a really great thing. consider having a few language lessons ahead of time. There are so many amazing platforms online where you don't necessarily have to do a language course, but you can just, for example, italki is one that I'm very familiar with, and you can reach out to a teacher and just say, like, I'm really interested in learning how to pronounce a few phrases, maybe say a couple of little funny jokes, or, you know, just something, and they can check your pronunciation about certain things. And, you know, it's always a good thing to have had a connection with someone from that country ahead of time. Maybe they'll even have some tips to share. So those are my main tips that are kind of connected with technology. And my last one is, like, go a little bit old school and maybe print out a language sheet. We actually have, as an opt-in for our website, a language sheet that you can download, and then you can copy and paste the language of, you can copy and paste the phrases that we have listed there, and there are so many. So we've tried really hard to come up with any possible phrase that you would need as a vegan traveling. There's also some pertaining to emergencies and zero waste as well. You can then go onto Google and copy and paste the translations in there, print it out, keep it in your purse. You can even use Google Translation to find pronunciation guides if you are using a language that doesn't have a script that we would know how to pronounce, for example, Thai or Mandarin or something like that. So you can add those in as well. My 8th tip is to leverage social media. This is a really, really cool one. And my friend Eunice Reyes, she told me about this one. It's really cool. On Instagram, if you hashtag vegan and the destination you're going to, for example, vegan Valencia, you will often see a lot of stuff, events, things like that will come up that will not be on Happy Cow, or they haven't been submitted into Happy Cow yet. So that's a really, really great one. And of course, something that I do a lot with my research is join local Facebook groups or other online communities of the destinations that you're going to. I personally don't like to go into these groups and say, you know, what's a great vegan restaurant, because there's information on that very widely available, or searching through their site. I think that's a way to irritate members a little bit, perhaps. But certainly, if there is maybe a question I have about, like, an animal experience, I might go into that Facebook group and say, like, I've seen this place, it looks like a sanctuary, but I know that sometimes these things can be a little bit misleading. So what's your opinion on this? And very often you get really great feedback, suggestions, alternatives, validation about your choice. So that is a really great one. Meetups.com as well. They often have really great events in the destination that you're going to, a great way to meet local vegans, participate in activism events, parties, you know, Christmas parties, whatever it is. This is a really fun one too.
What's the name of that website?
Meetups.com.
How do you spell that?
meetups.com.
Meetup. I'm sorry. Yes, Meetup. Sure. Got it.
Yeah.
I was on the same page. I thought it was Meat Tops. I was like,
Probably in my throat.
But beautiful accent.
It's not specifically a vegan site. Of course, they do all sorts of things, but very often you'll find like a vegan Bangkok group that you can join and see if they have any events going on. And my last tip is to consider using vegan travel professionals. So there are some incredible people in the world doing amazing things. For example, vegan travel agents. There are a few around the place, like Donna Zeigfinger from Green Earth Travel in the US, Jason McGregor from veganvacations.ca. These are vegan travel agents, like more traditional agents. And you know, sometimes if you don't want to be the person that contacts hotels and finds out if they have any like animal exploitation, like horse riding, for example, they will know, or they can ask and they can check. So these types of people can be really helpful. Booking through a travel agent is a really good idea. And then, of course, there are vegan tour operators like myself. We have the one vegan niche, but there are also some other really amazing there are other amazing tour operators that run vegan trips, or vegan-owned tour operators that do other kinds of travel, sort of more cultural homestays, for example, like Veg Voyages is one of those. There's some really interesting people doing really interesting things for all sorts of travel. For example, off the top of my head, Veg Johnson Journeys, they're really getting into no oil trips within the US, which is a really popular niche for vegans who are choosing to eat this way because for health reasons, or they happen to have very specific health conditions. So there really is a lot of stuff. So if you don't want to do all of those things in the first 8 trips, in the first 8 tips, then you might want to consider using a vegan travel professional. Those are all my tips. I hope I haven't overwhelmed you and your listeners.
Oh, well, that's great. They can play it over, and we'll put as much information as we can in the show notes. What about something that affects travelers that aren't just vegan, which is jet lag? What kind of tips do you have so that your clients can get the most out when they arrive at one of your amazing destinations?
Great question. We all think we're not going to suffer from jet lag and that we won't have a problem with it when we first travel to different time zones, and then we just get hit by it surprisingly, and it can affect us for several days. And of course, this is not fun when you have spent a lot of money on a vacation. Really, the only thing that you can do is to arrive a couple of days ahead of time and just, focus on getting adjusted. Another thing that you can do, I recently discovered, I got it in Australia, but I think it's available in other places. It's a sleep aid, and it's actually by Kirkland, which is a Costco brand that I bought in Australia, and they don't even really have Costco. I don't know how that works out, but finding some sort of natural sleep aid can be really good. Trying to get to bed at nighttime and staying awake throughout the day is helpful, but sometimes people, including myself, are just so exhausted that that's just not even an option. So arriving a couple of days ahead of time and giving yourself the time to just recover from that. But of course, that's not always possible for everyone. That's all of my tips. Sorry, I can't give better news.
No, that's good. The jet lag thing is real. It's also serious hydration on the plane, even though you're going to pee a lot. It just really makes a difference. And especially with Europe, when you get there and you get there at the midday and the afternoon comes, resist the nap that first day, and it will set you off. It is really difficult to do that. You've got to get outside, get in the sunshine, right? Start getting the clock that it is, the sun is out, it is late day, and that's what time it is. And stop deciding or stop trying to figure out what time it is at home.
Right. That's true, which is a natural inclination.
Yeah.
It's a justification for how, terrible we feel. Well, it's 2 a.m. at home. Which way? There's one way that it's easier going west or east. There's an easier way. Do you know which one it is?
I don't know. I would have to check that one, but I never find a huge difference. It really depends on the time that I left and when I arrived. Like, for example, on my recent trip, I was flying all night. It was a terrible night's sleep. And I arrived, I think, at 11 o'clock in the morning here in Canada. So I had a whole extra 8 hours to get until nighttime. I didn't do a very good job. I did have a doze. I would also say avoiding alcohol on the plane is a good idea for me. Just even 1 or 2 drinks normally screws up my sleep. So resist the urge to accept the beverage cart, the alcoholic beverage cart on the plane. That would be another thing that I personally do.
Well, I have one last question. Dotsie, you might have one, but talk to us about COVID. We're coming out of it, hopefully, knock on wood, but there's still issues always when traveling. People don't want to get sick on the plane, whether it be, used to be that, you'd get the flu or something and you'd be worried about that. Now, of course, it's COVID, but Tell us about some tips you have to travel, I guess, minimize our risk of getting sick. I noticed that you didn't mention anything about having any wipes or anything. Is that something you recommend?
Yeah, I think that's a great thing to have some sanitizing gel on us at all times. I was talking about this with Colleen just the other day, because she's a host on one of our trips. And when she did the last trip to Rwanda, she did get a little bit unwell. It wasn't COVID, it was before COVID. And something that we talked about is that, I think we're all a little bit better at personal hygiene these days. Mm-hmm. Because of the coronavirus, most of us would wash our hands before we sit down to food. We're more conscious of, touching our face and all of these things. Mm-hmm. So I think we're probably doing a better job at that than we were before. So certainly, making sure that you're sanitizing your hands or washing your hands before you sit down and eat. That's good for everything, COVID or not. But in terms of COVID, it's still a dynamic thing, and we're all doing the best that we can in the situations that we find ourselves in. But in recent months, many, many countries have just gotten rid of all restrictions in terms of testing and even vaccination status. So a really great resource for this is called joinsherpa.com. And it is an incredible website. It's maybe not as useful now because so many places are completely open compared with 6 months ago. Right. But it's really cool because you can filter by country depending on whether you are vaccinated or not. And then it nominates each country to whether you're free to enter the country, no testing required, nothing special to do, to you need to be tested, to some sort of quarantine. Of course, like China still is closed for tourists, and you just can't enter at all in that case. So that would be you cannot enter as a tourist. But what I really like about it is it explains exactly what you need in terms of the paperwork that you need to fill out. And it explains what you need in terms of the paperwork that you need in order to get to the destination, but also to get back. So for example, here in Canada, it's just been dropped just recently, but to enter back into Canada, even as a resident, you needed to fill in this app and this kind of stuff. So you don't have to do that now. And you can know that by going to Join Sherpa. I would always recommend people double check from other sources, but what I really like about Join Sherpa is that they have government sources that are very, very up to date listed there, so you can really see exactly what the government is saying about those things. But these days, we're not really having to think too much about this anymore in terms of restrictions and entrance and vaccinations and these kinds of things. For example, on our trips, you do still have to be vaccinated to come on our trips. We're looking to get through the winter because I think that's going to be a very interesting time. And then we're going to review and revisit this. And I think a lot of tour groups are going to be doing the same. And I think, follow government guidelines. For example, I was recently in Italy. You still have to mask on public transportation, which was kind of surprising, but nowhere else. So yeah, I guess just follow guidelines and these kinds of things. If you want to take extra precautions, then of course that's your own choice.
And does joinsherpa.com also give you advice about other diseases and the shots that you might need before going to a country? Or
that's a great question. I don't think so, but the CDC is a place that does give that kind of information, and very often people that are going to places in Africa or places where they might have more concern, they might like to go to the CDC, and they might like to go to visit a travel doctor that would give some recommendations, which you can take advantage of or not, depending on your feeling. For example, Personally, I don't take a lot of malaria medication when I travel because I look at the risk and I decide that there's probably not too high of a risk for me. Personally, that's my comfort level. So I generally don't. But yeah, seek professionals' help, and check out the CDC as well as a travel medical health professional.
Great.
Right.
Wow.
This might be our most information-rich show ever with tips. It's just like boom, 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 boom. It's a lot of work
Thank you.
for the person who is going to be doing the show notes because we got to get it all in. So people have the tips and the clicks.
We love it. Thank you so much, Brighde, for sharing all your expertise with us. And for everyone who's interested in learning more about how they can travel with World Vegan Traveler, where should they go?
They can go to wellvegantravel.com. We're wellvegantravel.com on all of the social media platforms. We do have a weekly podcast. I'm very proud because we've done like 6 months of episodes without a break, weekly episodes. And it's kind of like an audio travel guide. It's not just about vegan focused things. They can be just, for example, I just recorded an episode yesterday on the best sights and sounds and eats for vegans going to Vancouver, this kind of idea. And of course, my guests are vegan or in the vegan travel space or something like that. So maybe people might like to check that out. And of course, they can join our mailing list to learn all about our new trips. We're launching our 2023 France trips probably next week. So definitely check that out.
Yeah, your website really makes you want to just fly away to one of those countries. So thank you so much, Brighde, for being on the show. Dotsie and I really appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. It's been my pleasure. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Happy vegan traveling, everyone. Hey, folks. Okay. Back by very popular demand is our plant-powered plate fridge magnet, which you are going to receive for free if you leave us a rating and a review on whatever platform you're listening to this podcast on. So here are the details. Just write your quick review. Does not need to be long, does not need to be a whole story. Just be honest and speak from the heart. Then take a quick screenshot of the review you wrote and email it to us at podcast@switch4good.org. That's podcast@switch4good.org. And include your mailing address so we can send you a power plate. We are doing this because the more reviews we garner, the higher we go in search results, which means more folks will learn about our podcast. So the power is in your hands. Leave us a review and zoom, your power plate arrives at your doorstep.
So thank you so much for tuning in today. If we helped you in any way, then click the subscribe button and let's keep hanging out together. We have so much more to share with you.
And if you need more information on actually making the switch for good, please visit us at switch4good.org for loads of info. And you can subscribe to our mailing list where you will receive all sorts of super cool gifts, discount codes to our very fave dairy-free products, and a lifetime of powerful health tips.
So join us on the journey to Switch for Good. This is the future.